university progression. On stage to take part in the interview for Taza Hager, professor of real estate, columnist, writer at University, and the financial host, and Aubrey, president and CEO of the University of British Columbia Properties Trust, coming out from the West Coast, Vancouver today. With that, please welcome Taza and Aubrey for this special case study on the UBC Properties Trust on the story of success in post-secondary real estate management operations and lessons for the future progression. So with that, Taza, again, welcome.
Thank you very much, folks. It's always great to be back at House. I've spent many years here when I was a graduate student at the University of Toronto, and this is where I would come for fitness, we have a gym, and also for my haircut I used to have here. And at that time, the barber shop downstairs, which is, it's been in operation for 7 decades. It brings back great memories, especially the leather sofas that's still here. So it's really good to be back. And I'm really pleased to be here today with Aubrey and discussing today the experiences at UBC. Now, it's a very unique thing that they've got there, and it would be wonderful for us in the academic world, universities and colleges, to understand what UBC has been able to achieve aggressively and have been able to sustain their success over those past 2 decades or more. And I understand this revolves around this business model of UBC's property trust, and it has done wonderful things. And Aubrey, I'm going to ask you, what is this property trust? And I believe it's successful because you've been able to give back the university about $2 billion. So if nothing else catches everybody's attention, it's $2 billion. So how did you do it?
So the story begins. The story begins in the late '80s when one of the governors on the board of governors of the university had been there for a number of years and was sort of looking around at a lot of the undeveloped lands that UBC campus was situated on. And he ended up moving off the board. He had turned out, he was a provincial appointee on the board, his name was Bob Lee, and he approached the other board of governors, approached the provincial government to explore the possibility of starting up a development company that could monetize some of this latent, if you will, it was lands that likely never ever would be used for academic purposes, and it had been sitting there for many years. And for the most part, the lands that we have developed over the past couple of decades, in those years in the late '80s, they were surface gravel parking lots. They weren't even, there was no blacktop on them. It was just the gravel parking lots that were spread all over campus. And so it was that was the genesis of saying, hey, can we look at this and we monetize some of these lands that likely never ever will be used for academic purposes? And we can go into some of the details, but the fast overview of 30 years has been that we've now developed over 7 million square feet of buildable space. We've given back $2.2 billion towards the endowment at the university. $5 billion, and it's $5 billion with a B, in terms of total construction value that we've done. We've enabled the borrowing of the university. Because in British Columbia, public institutions, post-secondary institutions cannot borrow money. They can't go to RBC and take out a loan because that debt rolls up to the provincial debt. Because Properties Trust is we're a government, what we're called in British Columbia, we're a government business enterprise. It's with our own balance sheet, and so we have the ability to borrow a lot of money, and we have a lot of debt on our books against our assets. But the student housing department itself does not have the ability to borrow money to build student housing because they're part of the university itself. But because because we have built over 2.2 billion in an endowment, when the government is okay, the provincial government is okay with the university borrowing from itself, if you will, from the endowment. So that's unlocked a real opportunity for the student housing department of the university to build in the past 20 years. We've built over 10,000 student beds, and it's all been made possible by the endowment.
Fantastic. Now, it is my understanding that UBC has around 13,000 beds across campuses.
Yeah.
And is it true that you're the largest housing landlord in academic institutions? No other university college has 13,000.
Yeah, I know those numbers. I'm not sure where we rank, perhaps across the country, but I know certainly in British Columbia. And again, it's not. We've had this unique situation where we've been able to borrow from this endowment and add to our housing stock that way. Typically, what's happened, at least on the West Coast, in the past 20 years, is that any provincial money that comes available to build a new building on campus, usually the priority list is on a math building or a science building. So the student housing is shoved down the list. So, if you go outside of UBC and look at other post-secondary institutions, they don't really what they have an endowment that they can borrow from. And because provincial grant money usually is going towards the science or math or medical buildings, something like that, there have been no student residence buildings get built anywhere in the province except on UBC campus for that reason.
Amazing. Now, I've been to campus multiple times in the past 30 years, and I've seen those student housing built, and it's phenomenal. But the question I have for you is that if you compare the UBC experience with that of, for instance, my university, from Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson, we have about 48,000 students, and we have about 1,300 beds in our system. If you go out in the suburbs, maybe go all the way to Oshawa, or what they have on Ontario Tech University, small university, about 10,000 students, and they have 1,500 beds. So if we just focus on student housing for a second, what if a university or a college doesn't have endowed plans that UBC had? The big forest right there, and all the lands there. What if you don't have endowed plans? Can you still build or develop a property trust? What would it entail?
No, I think that's a good question. A good point. A lot of people will talk about UBC's success, but the success would not be possible at all without the natural advantage that we had a number of years ago. So if you could go back to 1915, when the university was a small school downtown Vancouver, and the province at the time come up with about 800 acres of land that a lot of it became part of Pacific Spirit Park, and there's all this with all the details about what happened, but there was a big chunk of about 800 acres of land out on the peninsula. And for those of you who know geography in the city of Vancouver, it's about as far west as you can get in the city. It's way over what we call the peninsula. Even today, after 108 years, it's still quite difficult to get to. We don't have rapid transit in the form of a train. So in 1915, there was something called the Great Trek. The students had a bit of a protest and said, look, we want this land sitting there, but there's no university to build because it was a downtown school. So what has happened is this 800 acres was given by the province, probably never dreaming how valuable 100 acres later this property, this land would become. Because at that time it was almost an afterthought. It was way out in the peninsula, but it's likely never ever going to get developed. It's way up, let's give that to this fledgling startup university. But really, you've struck on really what is the secret sauce that makes this work. We've been given a great piece of land that we can play with, and I think that a lot of our success stems back to the fact that we've been able to monetize this and turn this raw land into student housing, or whether it's into cash and endowment, or other uses that we see on campus today.
It is indeed, for those of you who have not been on to UBC, you must visit. the first time that I went there, I was a graduate student here at UFT, and I said, I'm really fortunate that I'm not studying at UBC, because the student housing and the location was so amazing that someone like me would never graduate. You have to see the campus. It's a gem. The water, the beach, the school, UBC has its own beach there. Right? It's a phenomenal place. So stay with these student housing for a second. UBC has a large cohort of international students. And in the past 2 years, the government of Canada issued about 980,000, maybe a million student study permits, and those students have graduated, mostly in colleges, a lot of them in university. And now, given the housing challenges, they may be having second thoughts as to what to do in the future. How do you see this conversation about limiting international students? How would this affect student housing at UBC?
So I think that there's probably another more philosophical issue there as well about how we fund operations and whatnot. That I would leave that to the university itself. But with respect to student housing, and maybe touching on how do we see demand going forward. What's interesting is with every new student housing project that we've opened, the wait list would think, common sense would tell you, okay, you're building a new building, the wait list will shrink. With each new building, and this is done for 20 years, our wait list has steadily grown for 20 years. And during that time, we added 13,000 beds. So with every new building that we open, you think, okay, well, we're opening up 500 beds in this building, there's 500 on the wait list. No, the wait list ends up growing by about 1,000. So it's a large population of students. Even 13,000 beds is probably a small dent, really, in the overall demand. So I'm not going to get political and wade into the merits or lack thereof of the international students and what they bring to campus life. That's for someone else to address and answer, not my area of expertise. But with respect to how it affects demand, I'm not worried. So we see the wait list it grows every year. We don't think we've put a dent in the supply side. Both at our Vancouver campus and also in Kelowna. So we're actively building a lot of housing in Kelowna as well. And Kelowna's got plans now. They're pressing out 10,000 students in the Okanagan, and with plans to get that probably close to 20,000 students. But there is a problem. It's even probably a bit more of a pronounced difference or a pronounced need in the Okanagan, in that where the campus is located in the Okanagan is quite far north of downtown, and so housing options that are non-university affiliated or surrounding that campus basically don't exist. So we have a real need in the Okanagan as well.
So let me go back to something that you have tremendous experience of, that's constructing new buildings. Now, in the past 3-4 years, we've noticed that there's been a tremendous variance in construction costs, disruption to supply chains, not sufficient amount of scalability, and all these challenges. So, what is your current experience with construction costs? How has that influenced your decisions to continue on planned construction? Has it reached the level where you say, you know what, we're going to stop now, wait for the costs to normalize, or is it just that you think it's still go ahead and continue with it?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, but it's more of the $1 billion question. Do we pause and wait for things to correct, or do we keep going? The urgency of some of these projects sort of dictate the schedule to us that sometimes really have the luxury of pausing. Although I think if we were purely looking at just the bottom line and not, there's other factors that play into what we do in terms of community, our campus life, and our shareholder being the University of British Columbia, expecting the delivery of certain projects. So with respect to construction costs, you're quite right. I think with this era really the last, let's call it 10 years even more, but let's just look at this last decade leading up and into COVID. You know, we had a period where we've never had 10 years like it in the history of our country with respect to interest rates. Just, we never have. They've been, you could basically, we were playing with free money. We talked about these rates. I wasn't around. I was around in the 80s, but I wasn't working in the 80s. I was in school. But, you know, if we were to talk about some of these rates to some people perhaps in the room or some of our colleagues who were working in that era, you know, it's like playing with free money. So
market rates in 89, market rate was 18%.
Yeah.
Why not?
So you know, we've enjoyed it and we've loved playing in that arena with very, very cheap money. Oh, the downside of that is it eventually caught up and then all of the stimulus money and all of the stimulus money that happened during COVID, well, it's a two-edged sword. You know, there's one side of it is, hey, it's great. It's a great for the economy, it gets things going, it helps us all, but the other side of that is that, you know, when the full effects of that are we're seeing now, where the workforce can't keep up with demand, and so subtrades are, you know, they're bad in their numbers, and so we've seen huge cost escalation. One of the things that we do at Properties Trust, again, we've built over 15 million square feet of space in the past 20 years, and over 5 billion, and currently in the pipeline now, we have over $1 billion of construction in underway right now, in active construction. We, with the exception of one single project where we had a general contractor that was a pure GC, we have procured all of that 5 billion, all of that 15 million square feet, all of it has been procured by CM. And it's not a construction management that gets converted. I know a lot of people they'll start out with CM, and then once kind of all the risks is de-risked, they'll say, oh, we're going to flip it to, and you flip this to CM, and you do a fixed fee on general conditions. We just haven't done that ever. So we are a true CM builder. We hold all the trade, all the contracts. UBC Properties Trust holds all of the contracts with the subtrades with CCPC 17 is a former contract with their subtrades. And we have found that has, I think in the long run, has been advantageous for us. The other thing I might just add to that is this. Typically, we have, before we kind of are fully going on a project, we like to have 75 to 80% of committed costs. In terms of the total budget, we like to have 80% sort of committed and locked in. Again, I'm only speaking for the Vancouver and for perhaps the British Columbia economy and what the trade pricing is doing out there right now. But we're stopping that policy internally because we think we have seen things are changing quickly in British Columbia, and I think we are seeing people realizing that projects have been canceled with high interest rates. There's all kinds of private developers that are just canceling projects. So that's starting to trickle through the subtrades. So we have a project in Kelowna right now. It's a $340 million project, 47-story building that we're building. It's going to be rental on top, institutional space at the bottom, about 150,000 square feet for the university, and a rental building on top. We are actually not committing at all because we think by waiting and only maybe plowing ahead and getting in the ground with about maybe not even 50% of the committed costs of subtrades, we think the longer we wait, we're actually going to be in better shape. Because I think it's impressive. At least I'm really confident with that statement. Again, I'm not speaking for Eastern Canada, I'm not speaking for what's happening here in the local market, but I think subtrade pricing and that escalation we're seeing month over month, you know, palpable changes month over month, that they can stop. So my recommendation if you're building, at least in British Columbia, would be, I think, there's a lot you're starting, maybe you're in the ground, okay, you're going to have to probably commit at certain prices for that, but you know what, don't maybe commit your drywall price yet, right? You're not in drywall until perhaps 18 to 24 months out from now. I think we're in a way different environment.
Excellent. Now, if you want a refresher on types of concrete,
construction management, risk and general contractors. I'm teaching a course right now. If you want to be an undergrad in construction management, you're welcome to join TMU. The question I have is that you're sitting in the city of Toronto, a part of the GTA, which is a larger country, but the city of Toronto, about 3 million people, 250 square miles. And most of our construction here is high-rise multi-family condominiums. I think about 85% of the dwelling units we add are high-rise. And there's tremendous demand for it. But eventually, things will change. So, what advice can you give to builders and developers who specialize in multi-family residential on entering into ground leases with academic institutions? Because we may not have endowed lands, tremendous amount of it, but they are parking lots that universities have. And when I was a graduate student here, we would always come out and look at this field outside the Gerstein Library, and we had to walk by it, and wondered what we can do if we were to take everything underground and do something on top. So there is a tremendous amount of land. We may have buildings on top of it right now, older buildings. But what can builders do to develop relationships with educational institutions, maybe ground leases and others? Is there something that they can start planning, because we don't have a big inventory of student housing space being built?
Yeah, if I were to bring out some of the different private developers, there's about 5 or 6 that have been the most prolific builders who have come and bought. They bought basically a prepaid land lease. Is the best way word. It's a prepaid 99-year land lease, but basically it trades almost at market. So right now, I'll just use an example. Polygon, who is a very big developer in Vancouver, is probably our most prolific and most repeat customer. They would pay about $500 buildable foot for that prepaid lease. It's not really that different. I mean, if you go right downtown, you're going to pay more than that for land. But basically, that's just almost treated as if it was freehold and not leasehold. But I think getting their head wrapped around, I think what developers would have to do, and I'm not sure is that model is as well known or familiar here in Toronto. But when we started doing that almost 30 years ago, to get the first developer to come and do that, it was very, very difficult. So it was long before I was at Properties Trust. But the folks involved with the trust at that time, Bob Lee was the founding chair of the board, and he was very familiar with this model because he had family ties to Asia and Hong Kong, and it was a relatively new model in British Columbia. I know this is quite common, leasehold is quite common in the UK, with lots of, I have cousins, as you might guess from my last name, I'm from Ireland. I was born there, but came here really young, so I don't speak with an Irish accent, but all my cousins in Ireland, they farm on farms that are 400 years into a 999-year lease, right? So it's a familiar form of holding land in many parts of the world. But in those early years in British Columbia, I would describe it like this. It's sort of like you're sitting around a swimming pool, and everyone says the water's warm, but everyone's afraid to jump in. And until you get that first person to jump in and say, hey, oh, you know what, the water is actually pretty warm. And then you're going to get people jumping in. And that's what happened in the early 1990s. We took a piece of land out to market. It was our very, very first leasehold project. We were trying to sell it. We didn't get any bidders. Not a single bidder came forward. Bob Lee flew to Hong Kong, talked to a developer in Hong Kong, and said, look, the Canadians, or at least the ones in Vancouver developers, are not getting this leasehold. They're afraid of it. They're afraid that the end buyers are going to buy the property. That's where the risk is. Yeah, we need to get the mechanics and the legality of it. I go and I prepay this 99-year lease, I build a building on it, I strata title it, I sell it as strata title condominium units. But is the buyer on the end going to pay market price for land for that condo. So this Hong Kong developer said, sure, I'll come over, I'll take on the risk. Really didn't know the local market, but understood well how this worked in Hong Kong. So the very first developer to do this was a Hong Kong developer in Vancouver. Guess what? All the other developers in Vancouver were watching that project. And when it came time to sell the units again, buyers lined up and bought the units. So I would say by the time we took our second piece of land out, all of a sudden we had probably 10 bidders on the land. So I think it's educating, educational piece around how the mechanics and how it works. But also it's trying to understand our buyer and say that is the buyer going to discount this condo? If there's two condos sitting side by side, one's freehold and one's on leasehold, what's the discount? And I would say we probably on end prices might be a 3% discount probably to market on the end product. Is what we see.
I think part of it depends on how the lenders feel when they issue mortgages on freehold, leasehold, maybe there's differences there. But absolutely marvelous. Here in Toronto, we saw the development of Canadian CN lands, Canadian national lands. There was also developers from Hong Kong who came in. But the land was sitting there for 200 years. Nobody took the initiative, and now you see it was almost a new city of high-rises right in the waterfront. So we have time for a few questions, even though Brian will be starting to walk here, he needs all that stuff walk here. But let's just take a quick 1 or 2 questions.
I do want to show you the slides.
You know what, I think we've covered most of the information that's in the slides anyway, so we're good.
So why not ask a question, because I think UBC's experience is really valuable for institutions and also for investors and developers.
Hi, thank you. I'm very interested in knowing what the challenges are that the Property Trust UBC is currently facing. What are your biggest challenges? Thank you.
So one thing I would recommend, there's some folks in the room today that have heard me speak on this before. One of the things, and I will get back to it, it's a roundabout way to answer your question perhaps, but one of the fundamental things I think that was what we did well, there's lots of things we didn't do well over the years, and we can look back and talk about lots of mistakes that were made at properties, and if we're doing it over again, what we would do differently. But one of the fundamentals I would recommend if you're at all, even just entertaining an idea like this, is it needs a separation from the university. This can't be a department of the university. So I report to a board of directors, and from day one, the independence of this organization, there is oversight. So there's some members from the administration, and at least one member from the board of governors from the university itself. I call it the mothership. So the mothership UBC, one of the members of the board of governors, and 4 members from the administration do sit on my board, but they are in the minority, so they can never vote the private, the other members who are on our board. And those members, independent members, are all from the university, from the real estate industries, and mostly retired folks from that have long successful careers in the real estate industry, mostly in Vancouver, and that's who makes up our board, and that's the majority. So there's 8 or 9 of them, and then 4 or 5 from the university, and they're really just there so they know what's going on, but they're not there really to influence or direct or the decisions. So one of the things I think is very fundamental is that, and I want to stress that, because without that, I think this enterprise would have failed long ago if we were just a department of the university. But our biggest challenge today is probably, like anywhere across the country, is trying to secure entitlements. So we have a unique situation in that because this land, it's funny today if you drive around, you would think, okay, it's all built up, it looks like one. But I referred to 1915 when this land was first given. It was so far out of Vancouver that it was not officially part of the boundary of the city of Vancouver. And it remains so to this day. So if you know, there's a north-south street not far from campus called Blanca, and Blanca is the border between Vancouver and the university. And we are not in Vancouver. So we go to Victoria, that's a capital, just for everyone's, to make sure everyone is aware. Victoria is where our provincial capital, where the seat of provincial power is. We go to Victoria and secure our entitlements. So our biggest challenge, we're in the middle of a land use plan update. It was last updated in 2011, and it was securing us 14 million buildable feet. And when I say that, that's non-academic, that's like all of the stuff that Properties Trust would do. And that's made up of rentals, that's made up of leasehold condos, we sell to third-party developers. It's made up of commercial load out there that supports the residential, grocery stores, Shoppers Drug Mart, and all the getting close to 300,000 square feet of commercial. So all of that is encapsulated in this 14 million allowable. But we've built about half of that out. So we have 7 million, as of today, we're about 7 million built, with about 7 million left to go. But we are in the middle of, right now as we speak, a request to Victoria to increase that remaining 7 to 10. So we're trying to bump that 3 million extra feet. And just to give you an idea of those who are going to be talking in terms of density, to give you what that feels like, it's 7 million feet is left approved right now if we don't get this through. I think we feel good about getting the extra through. But that 7 million is on an actual square feet of about land square footage of about 2 million. So our density factor is about 3.5. And we were looking for a total of 10, we were asking, and to take us to a density factor of about 5. And that, just to give you a sense of what that feels like, because a lot of you will know what a density factor of 5 is. That's when you're supported by a metro, you're supported by a subway system, and you have your towers now. When your density factor of 5, your towers are mostly in the 40s, 40 stories tall. That is our biggest single challenge. And what's interesting is that our first customers, our customers that have bought all of these leasehold condos over the last 30 years, of course, they're the NIMBYs that are showing up at our public hearing saying that we don't want one more condo built on this. So it's our own customers that have bought from us that are our biggest challenge now, because they're living comfortably out there in this beautiful campus, and of course don't want one single square foot of development added to the peninsula.
When it comes to land, I think the definition of an environmentalist is the one who builds his own house and then tells everybody else this is precious land, can't be built more. So before we have one more question, and while we look for other questions. Here's a trivia. Vancouver is such a small place. Vancouver City. There are only 45,000 single-family detached homes in Vancouver City. Vancouver City, 45,000. So no wonder that the whole planet wants to buy a house in Vancouver. And you've got 45,000 single-family detached homes. Prices going to go up. So, one more question, and we can call it a night. There's a band waiting for us. No? Is it? Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
So, quick note. Thank you all for coming. It's been a long day, a lot of information. Appreciate you staying here for the duration of the day. The band, L&T Connection, and drinks for the next 90 minutes to 2 hours, I think, in the East Common. So I encourage you all to